So it's Super Rugby round 2. The Aussies and the Kiwis are finally here. We've got 2 games to start with on the Friday before we tuck into Saturday's action. So Friday's games, Highlanders Blues, Rebels Reds. Now, I don't know if it's just a happy coincidence or if the scheduling team actually put a bit of effort into this, but I reckon these are 2 really interesting matchups. You might not look at them and go, there's anything too startling. Only 1 playoff team from last year and 3 teams who kind of got nowhere. But I reckon 2 good matchups. Highlanders trying to fight off a Blues team which has been slowly making up ground on the other New Zealand teams because they've been so far behind for such a long time. The Blues on the other side trying to close that gap, trying to catch the teams, and the team they were closest to last season was the Highlanders. So good matchup for these 2. Rebels and Reds, 2 teams that have gone under a lot of rebuilding, restructuring, new coaches. So 2 teams that we're not really quite sure where they're at, and we're going to get a chance to see where they are at on Friday. So let's start with the Highlanders Blues. First question we're really going to have for the Highlanders is, under Aaron Major, the new coach, are they the same team as last year? They've not had a huge amount of turnover. Obviously, their midfield is looking very different without Malakai Fekitoa. And when you look at the Blues midfield of Sonny Bill Williams and George Moala, you might say that, at least on paper, the Blues have got the bigger names there. Where the Blues are missing some of their bigger names is in the back row. Kaino is out, youngster Dalton Papali'i is out. So it's kind of up to some of the other guys to step up. For the Highlanders, they've got Sapawanga at 10, which you'd say gives them the edge over the Blues, with Bryn Gatland at 10. 2 guys kind of at really different stages of their career. Sapawanga, a semi-established All Black, kind of 3rd choice guy for a couple of years now, on his way out last season with New Zealand Rugby. And Bryn Gatland, got a taste of Super Rugby last year, really trying to stake his claim for a spot as a regular player. It happens for him that the other 2 main first 5s at the Blues are injured, so he gets his shot and he's going to have a point to prove. So interesting matchup there. I've also put Smith and Pulu. So Aaron Smith, one of the best number 9s in the world, and Pulu, a guy who's kind of been on the outer. He's been on a slightly downward trajectory with New Zealand Rugby anyway for the last couple of years. Hasn't seen the All Black jersey for a long time. He's the new captain of the Blues, so he has real got a mission to try and challenge for position in World Cup year next year. So the battle between them will be interesting. Very different players. Pulu likes to run the ball a lot, doesn't have anywhere near that kind of crisp pass that Aaron Smith has. But the Highlanders are a team that likes to give the other team the ball, so Pulu might get a chance to do a bit of running. It'll be an interesting battle. Naholo and Rieko Ioane, you couldn't ask for a better matchup in terms of wingers. These are 2 of the best wingers in the world, dynamic, fast, strong, good in the air, really good players. And it's going to be fun watching them just run at each other. I hope we get a chance to see one of them bust over the other, or one of them just smash the other. It's a great matchup. So on paper, it looks like it could be a really good fixture. Have the Blues caught up with the other New Zealand teams? They struggle on the road. I don't know how they'll go down in Dunedin. The Highlanders are usually pretty strong at home, although the Highlanders had a slow start last year. Blues had a good opening game against the Rebels last season, so really hard to say. Type 5 of both teams is like not that many household names on there. You got a few kind of fringe All Blacks and the guys, trying to put their hands up, but nothing really startling on either side, so it's hard to kind of give an edge one way or the other. Tui Pelotu's on the bench for the Blues, which is an interesting one. He can't beat out Scruffton or Kauli Tuioti for a spot in the second row. Matt Faddis on the bench for the Highlanders, possibly a victim of his own versatility as kind of a utility back. But I hope he gets on because he's always a really fun player to watch. So yeah, I mean, the Highlanders probably need to win just because the New Zealand Conference is that strong that you have to be targeting the Blues at home as a game that you win. The Crusaders, Chiefs, Hurricanes are all going to be another story. So you have to be targeting the Blues game as a winner. For the Blues, I mean, it's not one that you would say they should be winning, but they should be trying to push. They got close in a few games last season. They drew with the Chiefs, and they didn't really get embarrassed too much, so that they looked like they were closing the gap. And, an away game against the Highlanders is not an ideal start, but it's probably better than going to Christchurch or better than going to Wellington. So, yeah, we'll see if they can kind of put their hands up and take a couple steps forward to get close. Composure is going to be a real key because Highlanders, they do finish games well. Tana's been in charge for a lot longer, so we'll see if that has any difference, if the Highlanders are kind of set in their systems, or if he's going to tinker with what was a fairly successful setup under Jamie Joseph and Tony Brown. The next one with the Rebels and the Reds, like I said, two teams that have gone under a fair bit of change. The Rebels have imported a lot of players from the Force. The Reds under Brad Thorne have kind of cut ties with some senior Queensland players, most notably Quade Cooper is not going to be anywhere near the squad. So yeah, really interesting matchup. Rebels have to be the favourites just because of all the big guns that they've brought in. Reds have got a lot of young guys kind of coming through. But noticeably at 10, they've both taken a fairly conservative pick and picked, Debrasini and John O'Lance at 10. So nothing too startling there. So they're not really trying to set the world on fire from day one. And Korobidi and Parisi being out, that's disappointing, just because these are two of kind of the most, exciting wingers in Aussie rugby at the moment. So that's a pity, but I think still overall, the question of which team's going to really stand up is a big one. The Reds, they might see this as a game where they can go into Melbourne and nick some points, just because we still don't know how settled all these guys are, having had such big changes in personnel at the Rebels. But if you're the Rebels, you have to be looking at the team you've got and seeing this young Reds team coming at you, and you say we need to get off on the right foot by getting a good win to start off with. So it could be a long season for both of these teams. The Reds, just with the youth, and the Rebels, I mean, they have to improve on last season, so the expectations are a lot higher. But how quickly he can get everything settled kind of remains to be seen. So both teams will be targeting this game as one that's very winnable. Interesting with the Reds that there's no spot for the two naughty boys. So George Smith, who had his troubles over in Japan, isn't in the squad. And Carmichael Hunt, with his issues that he's had in the courtroom recently, not in the squad. So Aiden Towers at fullback, which is not ideal, but Brad Thorne is not a guy to muck around, and I think if he doesn't want Hunt, then Hunt's going to be nowhere near the team. Also, they've got a pretty dynamic looking front row with Tupou, Paenga Amosa and Slipper. So how they get around the park against guys like Tetra Faulkner, who's not what you would call a dynamic front row. He's solid, but he's not that kind of like Tongan Thor X-Factor player. Interesting matchup there. So yeah, the Highlanders and the Rebels are the favourites. The bookies have got them both kind of winning this one, not easily, but still fairly strong favourites. And it's really key games for both these teams early. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to kind of close games with some good some good rugby on show. It's finally a chance to see these guys in action, so I'm pretty pumped. Let me know who you think's going to win. Like I say, the home teams are the favourites, so will there be an upset? Who do you think's going to get all the tries? Yeah, who's going to come out on top? 3 new coaches, so really a lot of fresh stuff to see. We'll see how they go. Hopefully my Blues can do well. If I was picking them, I might not be picking the Blues, but you never know with the Blues' first game of the season. Really hard to say. So, yep, that's it for the Friday games. We'll have a look at the Saturday games probably a bit later on. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again soon.